History isn't always what you were taught. Some of the biggest events in human history never happened on battlefields or in front of cameras. They happened behind locked doors, inside secret meetings, and in buildings the public was never supposed to know about. What if the history that shaped your life was hidden on purpose? Today, we're opening the vault. Welcome to FactVault, unlocking the world's most fascinating truths. These are 10 secret historical events that quietly changed the world forever. Number 10. The secret meeting that created the Federal Reserve. November 10, 1910. 7 of America's most powerful bankers quietly boarded a private train. There were no reporters, no public announcement, no official record of what was about to happen. To avoid attracting attention, they even traveled under assumed names. Their destination was a secluded island off the coast of Georgia, Jekyll Island. Inside an exclusive private clubhouse, they spent 9 days discussing the future of American banking. Those meetings would eventually help shape what became the Federal Reserve System. One gathering, one conversation, one decision that would influence interest rates, inflation, financial markets, and economies around the world for generations. At the time, almost nobody knew the meeting had taken place. For years, the details remained largely hidden from the American public. Today, visitors walk through the historic Jekyll Island Club, often unaware that one of the most influential financial discussions in modern history unfolded inside those walls. If one secret meeting could quietly reshape the world's financial system, imagine what else history has kept hidden. Our next story takes us to the aftermath of the Second World War, where another classified operation quietly changed the course of science and the space race. Operation Paperclip. The Second World War had finally ended. Germany had surrendered, and much of the world believed the conflict was finally over. But behind closed doors, another operation was only beginning. Its name was Operation Paperclip. Officially, it was created to recruit German scientists. Unofficially, it would become one of the most controversial government programs in American history. The United States quietly brought more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to America. Many of them had worked for Nazi Germany during the war. Instead of standing trial, many were offered new identities, new careers, and a new life. Their scientific knowledge was considered too valuable to lose. One of the most well-known recruits was Wernher von Braun. His expertise would later help the United States develop advanced rocket technology. Years later, that work would contribute to NASA's Apollo program, which ultimately placed human beings on the moon. But the operation raised a difficult question. Should scientific knowledge ever outweigh moral responsibility? It is a question that historians continue to debate today. Thousands of official records connected to Operation Paperclip remained classified for decades. As more documents became public, historians gained a clearer understanding of the scale of the program and the difficult ethical questions it raised. If secretly recruiting former enemy scientists sounds unbelievable, the next story is even more surprising. In 1933, a decorated American general claimed that powerful businessmen had approached him with a proposal that could have changed the course of American politics. Number 8. The business plot. The year was 1933. America was in the grip of the Great Depression. Banks had collapsed. Businesses were failing. Millions of people had lost their jobs, their savings, and their hopes for the future. As President Franklin Delano Roosevelt introduced his New Deal, many Americans welcomed the sweeping reforms. But behind closed doors, not everyone supported the direction the country was taking. That same year, retired Marine Corps General Smedley Butler made an extraordinary claim. According to Butler, influential businessmen had approached him with an astonishing proposal. They allegedly wanted him to lead a large force of military veterans that could pressure the government and challenge Roosevelt's leadership. But instead of accepting the proposal, Butler refused. He chose to report what he said had happened to Congress. A congressional committee later concluded that there was evidence suggesting discussions of such a proposal had taken place. However, no one was ever prosecuted. As time passed, the story gradually faded from public attention. For decades, historians have continued debating exactly how serious the alleged plot really was. Was it a genuine conspiracy, an unrealistic proposal, or something in between? The debate continues to this day. After leaving military service, Smedley Butler wrote a book titled War is a Racket. In it, he reflected on war, politics, and the influence of powerful interests based on his own experiences. More than 90 years later, the business plot remains one of the most debated political stories in American history. If an alleged plot against a government sounds unbelievable, our next story takes us inside one of the most secretive intelligence programs ever uncovered. Thousands of official documents were destroyed, but not all of them. Number 7. Project MK-Ultra. The Cold War wasn't fought only with weapons. It was also fought with secrets. A few of those secrets became as controversial as Project MK-Ultra. In the early 1950s, the Central Intelligence Agency launched a classified research program. Its stated objective was to better understand human behavior, interrogation techniques, and methods of influence during a time of growing international tension. To support the research, the program funded projects through universities, hospitals, research institutions, and other organizations. Much of this work remained hidden from the public for many years. As time passed, journalists, researchers, and government investigators began asking difficult questions. What exactly was Project MK-Ultra involved in? How extensive had it been? And why had so little been made public? Then another discovery raised even more questions. Many of the program's official records had been deliberately destroyed. For a moment, it seemed the full story might never be known. But not every document disappeared. A small collection of surviving financial records and archived files allowed investigators to reconstruct parts of the program. Those surviving documents revealed that the project had operated for years under extraordinary secrecy. Even today, historians continue studying the remaining records to better understand the full scope of what happened. Some questions have been answered, others may never be. The destruction of so many official files means parts of the historical record have been lost forever. What survives today is only a fraction of the complete story. If one classified intelligence program could remain hidden for years, our next story reveals how an unexpected scientific discovery sparked decades of research and debate. Number 6. the vaccination that secretly contained a virus. The year was 1955. Polio was one of the most feared diseases in the world. Every summer, families lived with the fear that the virus could strike without warning. Hospitals filled with young patients. Entire communities searched for hope. That hope arrived with the development of the polio vaccine. For millions of parents, it was one of the greatest medical breakthroughs of the 20th century. Vaccination campaigns quickly spread across the United States and many other countries. Millions of children and adults received the vaccine, believing they were finally protected from one of history's most devastating diseases. Years later, scientists made an unexpected discovery. Some early batches of the polio vaccine had been contaminated with a virus known as SV40. The contamination occurred because certain vaccine production methods at the time used monkey kidney cells that unknowingly carried the virus. Once researchers identified the problem, manufacturing processes were updated and the contaminated material was eliminated from future vaccine production. The discovery led scientists to begin studying whether exposure to SV40 had any long-term effects in humans. Over the decades, researchers published numerous studies. Some explored possible links between SV40 and certain diseases. Others found no conclusive evidence of a direct relationship. Even today, scientists continue to examine the historical data and published research to better understand the virus and its significance. While the contamination itself is well documented, its long-term impact remains an area of ongoing scientific study. Many people only learned about the contamination years after it had occurred. More than half a century later, researchers are still publishing studies that help improve our understanding of this chapter in medical history. If medicine can quietly change history, our next story asks a very different question. Did one of history's greatest explorers know more than he ever revealed? Number 5. Did Christopher Columbus know more than we think? The year was 1492. Christopher Columbus set sail across the Atlantic Ocean in search of a western route to Asia. His voyage would become one of the most influential journeys in human history. After weeks at sea, his expedition reached land in the Americas. The discovery reshaped global exploration, trade, and the course of history. But centuries later, one question continues to intrigue historians. Did Columbus know more than history has traditionally suggested? Some researchers believe earlier voyages, forgotten maps, or scattered reports may have hinted that land existed across the Atlantic long before Columbus began his journey. These ideas remain the subject of historical debate. No conclusive evidence has proven that Columbus possessed prior knowledge of another continent. Even so, the possibility continues to fascinate historians and explorers alike. Another mystery has endured for more than 5 centuries. Columbus remained convinced that he had reached the outskirts of Asia. Even after multiple voyages, he never accepted that he had encountered an entirely different landmass. Some historians believe he genuinely misunderstood the geography of the world. Others suggest political, economic, or personal motivations may have influenced how the discoveries were described. Whatever the explanation, one fact remains clear. His voyages permanently connected Europe and the Americas, transforming trade, exploration, migration, and world history forever. There is one more fascinating detail. Nearly 500 years before Columbus, Norse explorer Leif Erikson had already reached North America. Archaeological discoveries at Lonceau Meadows in present-day Canada provide strong evidence of that earlier voyage. Unlike Columbus's expeditions, however, the Norse settlement did not establish lasting connections between Europe and the Americas. History often remembers the journey that changed the world, not necessarily the one that came first. If exploration could reshape civilizations, our next story shows how one man's decision may have helped prevent a global catastrophe. Number 4. The man who may have prevented nuclear war. September 26, 1983. The Cold War had pushed the world to the brink. Relations between the United States and the Soviet Union were at one of their lowest points. Nuclear weapons stood ready on both sides. One mistake, one misunderstanding could have changed history forever. Deep inside a Soviet early warning command center, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov began what seemed another routine shift. His job was simple in theory, but almost unimaginable in practice. If the warning systems detected an incoming nuclear attack, he had only minutes to report it to his superiors. That report could trigger a military response. Then it happened. Without warning, alarms echoed through the command center. The computers reported that a nuclear missile had been launched from the United States. Seconds later, they reported another, then another. The warning screens flashed with increasing urgency. Everything suggested that a nuclear attack was underway. Military protocol demanded immediate action. Every second mattered. But something didn't feel right. Petrov paused. He looked beyond the warning lights and questioned what the computers were telling him. He reasoned that a real nuclear first strike would almost certainly involve hundreds of missiles, not just a handful. Trusting his experience over the technology in front of him, he made a decision that few people would ever have the courage to make. He reported the warning as a false alarm. Then he waited. Those next few minutes must have felt like hours. Finally, confirmation arrived. There had been no missile launch. The Soviet satellite system had mistakenly interpreted sunlight reflecting from high-altitude clouds as incoming nuclear missiles. The alarms had been wrong. One decision, made in a matter of minutes, may have helped prevent one of the greatest military miscalculations in modern history. For many years, Stanislav Petrov's actions remained largely unknown outside military circles. Only after the Cold War did the full story become more widely known. Today, historians and military analysts continue to study that night as a remarkable example of human judgment prevailing over technology. If one person's decision could help prevent disaster, our next story reveals how a secret agreement quietly reshaped the future of an entire region, not with weapons, but with maps, pens, and private negotiations. Number 3. The secret agreement that redrew the Middle East. The year was 1916. The First World War was still raging across Europe and the Middle East. Armies fought on distant battlefields. Empires struggled to survive. But while the world focused on the war, another decision was quietly taking shape behind closed doors. In private meetings, British diplomat Mark Sykes and French diplomat François-Georges Picot began discussing the future of the Ottoman Empire after the war. Their goal was to divide large parts of its territory into British and French spheres of influence after the war. There were no soldiers in the room, no battles, no headlines, only maps, pens, and confidential negotiations. Across a table, lines were drawn that would influence the future of millions of people. Entire regions were divided on paper. Communities, tribes, and historic territories found themselves separated by borders they had never chosen. The people who lived there were never part of the negotiations. For a time, the agreement remained secret. Many leaders in the region believed different promises had been made about what would happen after the war. Then, in 1917, everything changed. The agreement became public. Its publication revealed how major powers had quietly planned the future of an entire region while the war was still being fought. More than a century later, historians continue to study the agreement and its lasting influence on the modern Middle East. Some of today's international borders still closely resemble boundaries first outlined during those confidential discussions. A conversation held behind closed doors more than 100 years ago continues to shape world politics today. History can be changed by wars. It can be changed by revolutions. Sometimes it can even be changed by a single conversation. Our next story moves from diplomacy to psychology. Inside a laboratory, one experiment challenged what many believed about human nature. Number 2, the experiment that changed psychology forever. The year was 1961. Inside a psychology laboratory at Yale University, an experiment was about to begin. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary study about learning and memory. Volunteers arrived, believing they were taking part in scientific research. They had no idea they were about to become part of one of the most influential experiments in the history of psychology. Each participant was instructed to administer an electric shock whenever another participant gave an incorrect answer. What they didn't know was that the shocks were not real. The person receiving them was an actor. Everything had been carefully designed to test a different question. How far would an ordinary person go when instructed by an authority figure? With each incorrect answer, the machine appeared to deliver a stronger electric shock. The actor began to protest. Then he pleaded for the experiment to stop. Eventually, he fell silent. Many participants became visibly uncomfortable. Some questioned whether they should continue. But each time they hesitated, the researcher calmly responded with the same instruction: "Please continue." Those 2 words carried remarkable influence. When the study was complete, the results surprised even the researchers. Approximately 65% of participants continued to what they believed was the highest level of electric shock, simply because they had been instructed to do so. The study became one of the most discussed studies in modern psychology, not because of electricity, but because it revealed how powerful authority can be in shaping human behavior. The study also transformed research ethics. Today, experiments involving human participants are subject to much stricter ethical standards designed to protect volunteers.
More than 60 years later, psychologists, historians, and educators continue to discuss the questions raised by the Milgram experiment. Its findings remain relevant wherever people face pressure to obey authority. History is often changed by wars, sometimes by discoveries, and sometimes by a single decision made behind closed doors. Our final story takes us to one remarkable weekend in 1971. A decision made in private would reshape the global financial system and continue influencing economies around the world. Number 1. The weekend that changed money forever.
The year was 1971. The global economy stood at a crossroads. For decades, the United States dollar had been linked to gold under the international monetary system established after the Second World War. That system had helped shape global trade and finance for a generation. But behind the scenes, growing economic pressure was testing its limits. On one quiet weekend in August, President Richard Nixon and his senior economic advisors gathered at Camp David, away from television cameras, away from reporters, away from public attention. They spent the weekend reviewing economic reports, discussing currency pressures, and debating the future of the American economy. Few people realized that the decisions made during those meetings would soon affect the entire world. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon addressed the nation. He announced that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The decision became known as the closing of the gold window. It marked the beginning of a major transformation in the global financial system. Currencies would no longer depend on direct conversion into gold. Instead, modern financial markets gradually evolved into the system that exists today. Economists continue to debate the long-term effects of that historic decision. Some view it as a necessary response to economic realities. Others believe it fundamentally changed the way money functions around the world. But one fact is undeniable. That single weekend became one of the most influential turning points in modern economic history. Many people remember President Nixon's televised announcement. Far fewer realized that the decision itself had been carefully shaped during private meetings long before it was presented to the public. Sometimes the biggest changes in history begin quietly, not with headlines, not with celebrations, but with conversations behind closed doors. History isn't always written on battlefields. Sometimes it's written inside laboratories, sometimes inside government offices, sometimes inside secret meetings, and sometimes inside a single room where only a handful of people know that the world is about to change. The 10 stories you've explored today remind us that history is often shaped long before the rest of the world ever hears about it. The greatest discoveries aren't always buried underground. Sometimes they're buried inside forgotten documents, declassified files, hidden archives, and the questions that history never fully answered. Which of these hidden historical events surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed uncovering these fascinating stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to FactVault, and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into history's greatest mysteries. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and remember, the truth is far more fascinating than fiction. We'll see you in the next episode of FactVault.